Okay, we're rolling. I have tried doing this like 4 separate times, but I'm currently recording on my iPhone 11 and it just it didn't have enough storage, so in the middle of my last take it just stopped. So hey, it's my first YouTube video, my first YouTube channel. Things are bound to happen, so it is what it is. Hi, I'm Emily. Thank you so much for watching this video. Welcome to my channel. I'm so excited for you to watch this. I'm excited to make this and start this journey. I have been really wanting to delve into YouTube and create my own content here. Whether people watch it, if people don't watch it, either way, I get to just talk about the things that I like to do, hobbies, you know, whether that's reading or cooking or playing video games, stuff like that. I just have somewhere that I can kind of build a community here. Whether it's one person or a bunch of you, I don't care, but thanks for being here. Today, since it's the start of 2025, I thought I would go over my physical TBR for this year. So this year, I am going to try to completely stick to my physical TBR and finish up reading those. So every year I set a goal for 20 books to read within that year. I know that's quite small compared to other creators. They have like 50 books, 100 books. I saw someone who had 365 books that they were reading in that year. Absolutely nuts, but more power to you. If you could read that many books in a year, I am actually jealous. But I am a certified slow reader, so I like to take my time with books. Sometimes I get into slumps or I just don't feel like reading in that moment. I'd rather do something else. So 20 books for me is a very achievable goal, and I can definitely go past that if I so choose to, or I can just stick within it and read what I want to read instead of having to read things just to meet the goal. So this year I have quite a bit on my physical TBR, but not too overwhelming. Last year I went on a pretty strict no book buying ban. Well, a book buying ban. And I didn't buy any physical books. I really just used Libby with my library card, or went to the physical library and rented books there, or I thrifted books. So I just couldn't buy anything from a bookstore. I think it was pretty successful, to be honest. So I'm starting to get a lot of anxiety from seeing how many books I had to read because I just could not stop buying them. But now I think I have a pretty achievable list, and I think with all of these books I can achieve my 20 books within a year with literally just these books, which would be pretty great. I wouldn't have to buy anything within the year, and if I did, I wouldn't feel bad about it because I am slowly starting to get rid of these books on my TBR. I can add some new ones without feeling like, oh god, I have so many friggin' books to read. Without further ado, let's go through my TBR this year. So I'm first going to go through finishing or continuing series that I have already started. So one of the big ones that I am going to continue this year is a Stormlight Archive. I just recently finished Oathbringer. It was the first book that I finished this year. I started reading it last October, and again, I am a slow reader. So it took me a couple months to finish that book, but God, is Oathbringer such a good book. The Stormlight Archive genuinely means so much to me, and I'll probably have to do a full video just on those books because God, they are just incredible. I have never read books or fantasy like that before. Brandon Sanderson is such an approachable author, and his writing style is just incredible. So I will be continuing with the Stormlight Archive with Dawn Shard. Yeah, Dawn Shard. This is the little novella in between books 3 and 4. And it just goes through some of the side characters. I don't know specifically who. You're gonna see in this video, I don't really read the blurbs in the back. I usually just go into books pretty blind because I don't really want to be spoiled or have any expectations going in. I just want to fully open myself up to this book with a blank slate and go through it. So Dawn Shard is a little novella in between books 3 and 4 of the Stormlight Archive. Excited to read this little book, get to know some other characters, and have some fun with that. And alongside it, I will be reading Rhythm of War this year. I think I'm kind of stuck with reading one Stormlight Archive book a year. It has taken me quite a bit of time to get through this series, not because it's bad, but just because they're pretty thick. And again, like I keep mentioning, I am a slow reader, so I need some time to get through these books. So I will at some point read this throughout the year, and I know I'm gonna love it. I love these characters. They mean so much to me. Dalinar, Kaladin, Shallan, they're everything. I love them. So I'm very excited to read this book this year. I will most likely not read Wind and Truth this year. That'll most likely be a 2026 read or end of this year read, but I will not be picking that book up until they have the paperback version because I like my books to match. I have all the paperback books. I am not going to buy a hardcover book just because the book just came out. I can slow down and wait until it matches my set. And another series that I have read and started last year was the Heroes of Olympus series. I read those books when they were coming out by Rick Riordan, and I absolutely love them. I am currently on Mark of Athena. Yes, I did have to get the original Dust Jacket version because this is the one that I read when I was younger. I did not keep my books, unfortunately. I gave a lot of myself away that I shouldn't have when I was younger and should have kept some things that had some sentimental value, but it's okay. We got some new ones. So I'm on Mark of Athena, which means that I have 2 more books in this series, which will be House of Hades and The Blood of Olympus. So I will be completing this series this year. They do look quite thick, but they are, YA books. So the text isn't very large. Or the text is large. The margins are pretty large as well. So I read these books pretty quickly, and I also love these characters. I am such a Percy Jackson girly. Getting to see him when he's a little bit older. I did reread the Percy Jackson books 2 years ago and had such a blast reading them and remembering all of the adventures that I had with Percy and Annabeth and Grover, and then continuing on with some new characters in this book. Going to be finishing up those 2 because this year, last year, I was reading through the Heroes of Olympus, and I'm still working my way through the Stormlight Archive. I have not allowed myself to start any new series because it's a lot of commitment to read a lot of books. So once I am completely done with Heroes of Olympus, I'm going to finally be able to read one of my most anticipated books, The Poppy War. The Poppy War is such a hyped up book that I think deserves its hype from what I hear. I'm so excited to get into it. All of the reviews that I see of this book is it's gonna stomp you in the stomach. It's gonna kick you in the head. It just seems like such a brutal book, but I am ready to be beaten up and I'm ready to hurt. I'm ready to dive into this war epic fantasy, I think. I don't know. So I'm just very excited to get into this book, and once I'm done with this, I will continue on with the series, and I'll buy the 2nd and 3rd book once I'm done with this one. And another series that I'm going to be able to start this year, once I finish Heroes of Olympus, is Gideon the Ninth. This is a book that I have been wanting to read for so long. Have been so intrigued by it because lesbians with swords, yeah, hell yeah, I want to read that book. I started it at some point a few years ago when I first picked it up, and I just couldn't really get into it. I'm not used to reading sci-fi, and I didn't know that this was kind of like a sci-fi fantasy book. Again, I'm not really sure 100% what it's fully about, but she looks super hot. So I'm in it. So this will be something that I'm very excited to read this year. Another book that I'm very interested in getting into that I've heard a lot of good things about is Demon Copperhead. There is a creator online that I absolutely love. His name is Books Are Sick, and he's currently reading this book now, and I trust his reviews implicitly. I started reading Pet Sematary last year. Keep thinking it's 2024. I don't know why. Last year I read Pet Sematary because of him, and that book changed my life. It is one of the best books I have ever read, the scariest book I have ever read. I really, really trust his reviews. He's reading this currently in January and he's currently loving it. He said that the beginning is a little bit slow. It's kind of hard to get into, but once you do, it kind of flows immediately into it. So I'm very excited to read this book finally. I've owned it for a few years, so it's time to crack this open and get into this. I do want to read some classics this year. I'm not sure if 1984 technically counts as a classic, but I will be reading 1984 this year. This is my husband's copy, and I know the story, not completely, but I know like the big things that happen in this book. I've never fully read it before, so I'm excited to read this, get some dystopian stuff in, especially because we feel like we're living in a dystopian world right now. I am quite looking forward to delving into this. Talking about dystopian stuff, I will also be reading The Handmaid's Tale this year. I have already read this book before, but I do think it is very important to read this again. Margaret Atwood is a really well-known Canadian author, and her prediction of what American politics would turn into is... Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Someone hit my door and it just scared the shit out of me. Anyways, Margaret Atwood, I will be reading her. I think it's very important to read her right now, especially with what's happening with women's rights in America. I don't currently live in America, but I am American. I am in Canada now. I've been here for about 3 years, specifically because I wanted to leave what is happening there. So, yeah, I just think it's going to be really important to read this and remind myself. This is a book that I'm going to try to also annotate. I'm not a big annotator. I forget to highlight and underline my books. I get so into them that even when I find a passage and I'm like, oh my god, that's so, like, oh, that hits me so hard, I just move on. I forget to underline it, and then I'm like, man, I should have really annotated that part, or like highlighted it, or taking the time to underline it. But this year I'm going to try to do it at least with The Handmaid's Tale. And then lastly, in the classic section, I'm going to be doing Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I actually did start this when I first thrifted it, maybe like 7 or 8 years ago. But then I had like work and I was still in college, so kind of fell through the cracks. I was enjoying it when I was reading it, so I will be restarting it this year and yeah, maybe getting into some other classics, hopefully. Maybe just throwing in these 3 will be enough to kind of fuel my classic section of the year. I love graphic novels. I'm going to be reading this graphic novel here, George Sand. This is about a English poet, I believe, and I think that she just kind of defied gender norms, because back here you can see her walking amongst all of these Englishmen wearing the same clothes and pants. So I think that it's kind of her just being like, fuck the system, I'm gonna do and be whoever I want to be and dress however I want to. I got this gorgeous copy from The Beguiling here in Toronto. I do live in Toronto. I saw this cover and I just knew I was going to love it. I love the art style inside. It's totally my jam, so super excited to read this year. These are 2 books that I thrifted last year. Scarborough is one of them. This is a fictional Canadian book about a real neighborhood here in Toronto, Scarborough. And this is a low-income neighborhood. This book is going to highlight a lot of the experience of what it's like to live in Scarborough. So I think this will be a really important read. It won a bunch of awards when it came out here in Canada, so I'm really excited to read this. I think it centers around some of the kids that live in Scarborough. There is a movie about this book, I'm pretty sure, or at least it has the same name. So if it is the same thing, then I'll watch the movie after this. So yeah, I'm excited to delve into that. I think it's important to read things about real life and understanding people's experiences. Even if it's fiction, it's still based on truth. So excited to get into that. So I am huge into Dungeons and Dragons. I actually have a weekly campaign that I'm in with some online friends, and I love Dimension 20. And one of my favorite seasons from last year was Burrow's End, from the best GM ever, other than Brendan Lee Mulligan, of course. I'm not going to diss him, but Abria Iyengar just does something to me, and she GM'd that season, Burrow's End, and it was inspired by Watership Down. So I saw this at the thrift store and I was like, well, inspired one of my favorite Dimension 20 seasons. I think I owe it to Abria to read the book that she based it on. So I'm excited to read this. I believe this is about some talking rabbits who are trying to find a new home. And I think it really delves into what beings will do to survive. So very excited to read this. I think it's going to be very depressing. So yeah, I'm going to read this year too. So I want to read some more short stories this year. And I have owned this book for a long time, The Refugees. This is an anthology short story book, surrounding the experience of Vietnamese Americans. I read the first short story in this when I first bought it, like 6 years ago, and I just have never picked it up again. And I really enjoyed it. It's very short. I'm sure I can get through this within a couple of days. This is going to be on my TBR this year alongside the stories of Eva Luna. So this book is from a bookstore near my apartment, and it is owned by just the biggest character in the world. He is so eccentric, and his bookstore really is the kind of place where there are books piled up everywhere. There are bookshelves bursting at the seams, books piled on top of books. Then there's a separate room that has even more books, but these are like older books. I'm talking like 300-year-old books that are almost falling apart if you touch them. And then there's an upstairs section with even more books. And then there's a back room that if you open the door, it sets off the alarm, and he has even more books back there, but he knows where all of these books are. And he really recommended this author and this series, and he really sold it to me, so I bought it because I couldn't say no to him. So this is about Eva Luna, and I'm pretty sure these are like short stories about her life. It starts out with one of her lovers after they've had some fun, and he's like, "Oh, Eva, tell me a story." And she's like, "Okay," and tells him all of these stories about her and her adventures. So I think this will be a very fun read about a very interesting woman. So that'll be cool. This is a book that I have been wanting to read. Unfortunately, it came with a little blurb from J.K. Rowling, which really sucks because I do not support her anymore. I have not bought anything new of Harry Potter or her other books because I am a trans ally as a bisexual woman, and yeah, so having her blurb up there, I'm like, why? But this was a gifted book from my mother-in-law, so I will still read it because I have it. And this is I Capture the Castle. It's about a 17-year-old girl who's in this castle and is trying to practice her writing, and I think they're short stories that she writes. She writes in 3 journals, is what it says in the back. By the end of it, she captures the castle, which is the reader. So this will be, I'm sure, a nice whimsical read. I have another big boy this year. This is technically not a part, like it's not a continuation of a series, it's more a prequel of a series, is A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. I love Priory of the Orange Tree. It is one of my favorite books ever. I have read it twice. I absolutely love it. It has dragons, it has lesbians. Let's fucking go. So this book is a prequel to Priory of the Orange Tree, and I'm sure I'm going to love it. It's just giant. So I will work my way through this slowly this year, and I'm sure I'll have a good time because there is more sapphic love in this, and I will never get enough of that. So great. To continue with, I guess, like gay stories, this is Luda by Grant Morrison. I love Grant Morrison. If you are a DC fan, he has written a lot of DC comics, very iconic ones, as well as Marvel stuff, but I'm more of a DC person, which, a small shout out, my husband and I are going to start a podcast called The Podcast of Tomorrow, which is a DC fan cast where we're going to go through all of the old DCU movies by Zack Snyder, critique them to get ready for James Gunn's new run of the DCU. So, shameless plug, if you want to, you can find that on Spotify when that comes out. So this is a book called Luda, which is about an older drag queen who is starting to lose her fame because she's older. She's not the new shiny thing. Here comes Luda. She is a captivating new drag queen and convinces Lucy to teach her her secrets, which this book has a lot of magical realism where there's a thing called glamour that Lucy has been using to basically make herself even more desirable and even more charismatic. So Luda convinces her to, or I guess even like seduces her to show her the secrets of the glamour. I did actually start this last year, about a year ago, honestly, and I couldn't really get into it at the time. I was traveling a lot, so I just didn't really feel like reading it, to be completely honest, so I stopped reading it, but I will be starting it again from the beginning and getting into it because I love drag queens and I love Grant Morrison, so I'm sure I'll like it. Okay, we only have 3 books left, so this one is A Natural History of Dragons, a memoir by Lady Trent. So this is a fictional memoir, and it's obviously about dragons. So this scientist goes around and creates this, or had created the first full dragon science book. God, my brain isn't working. But basically, she studied dragons. It's a memoir about her life and how she researched them. So it's a fake memoir, obviously, because unfortunately dragons are not real. So I think this will be very interesting. There are also illustrations inside. Like, here's some illustrations inside, which will be very helpful to compare the description versus the illustration. So I'll be reading that this year. And then this is The Word is Murder. I have no idea what this book is about. Obviously probably about murder. Technically it's my husband's book, but I have it on the shelf and I could always use a little like mystery book to get into. So I'll be reading that this year and I hope that it's fun. And then lastly, the last book on my TBR is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. We started with Brandon Sanderson and we're ending with him. I will be reading this book this year and this was gifted to me by my friend. I think this is technically Brandon's only true romance book. So I'm very excited to read this. Again, I don't really know much about it, but I'm sure it's going to be captivating, imaginative, and just a whole lot of fun because it's Brandon. How am I not gonna love it? Yeah, that is my physical TBR this year. I am really excited to get into this year of reading and I'm going to try my best to stick with this, but if there's other books that are interesting to me that I want to read, then I'll try to find them through Libby to do an audiobook or read it through an ebook. Or if I can try, again, just find it at the thrift store. I'm gonna try to keep up with my book buying ban just because it worked so well last year and I actually read the books that I set out to read, which was really great. So I'm going to continue with that this year. But yeah, that's kind of it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Again, I'm gonna stumble and I'm gonna fall, but I'm so excited to start this YouTube channel. I hope that it makes me feel like I'm creating something. I'm a very creative person and I feel like creating content might be something that I could be really good at. And again, if no one watches it, then it's really just for me. And I want to try to show you guys my real self, not to get like incredibly deep. I'm sure I'll talk about it in later videos, but I have a hard time taking off the mask a lot that I wear around people. So I want this community to be me being me, completely unmasked, just myself. And I won't care whether, you know, I'm not the person that people think I should be. I'm just me, the biggest nerd in the world. So again, thank you so much for watching. I'll try to put out some more content later. I hope you guys look forward to that, and thank you so much for watching. Bye. Post recording me, I am literally dripping in sweat. My face is so red because I don't know, it's just like a lot of effort. Not effort, but like, I was just really nervous making that video, so yeah. I hope it gets easier for me and I get less nervous. I'm sure I will the more I do it, but again, this is the true side of making content, I guess.